If you were born before 1975 and they always felt like life carries an extra weight for you, like everything requires more effort, more endurance, more emotional strength. This is not random, and according to Dolores Cannon, it was never meant to be easy for you. Many people from this generation describe the same quiet feeling they've carried since childhood. A sense of responsibility that arrived too early. A seriousness that never quite left. A feeling that the world has always been heavy, demanding, and often disappointing, even during moments that were supposed to feel joyful. Dolores Cannon encountered this pattern again and again while working with thousands of subjects through her QHHT sessions. Different lives, different countries, different backgrounds, yet the same soul signature. Dolores explained that souls born before 1975 largely belonged to a transitional generation. These were not ordinary incarnations. These were volunteers who arrived during one of Earth's densest and most unstable periods. A time when fear-based systems, trauma, war memories, and generational pain were deeply embedded into the collective field. To incarnate during this era required unusual strength. If life has always felt heavier for you, it's because you didn't come here to escape the density. You came to hold it together. According to Dolores Cannon, these souls agreed to incarnate before the major vibrational shift began. You entered when the world was still emotionally rigid, spiritually closed, and resistant to change. Many of you grew up without emotional safety, without spiritual language, without guidance for what you were sensing internally. So you learned to survive by becoming strong, observant, and self-contained. This is why so many people born before 1975 feel older than their age. Why rest rarely feels truly restful. Why joy often feels muted or delayed. Your nervous system adapted to an environment that demanded endurance rather than ease. Dolores Cannon said these souls often report feeling like they've been holding the line their entire lives, supporting families, stabilizing workplaces, absorbing emotional chaos, or being the strong one while others fall apart. And the exhausting part is that most of this labor went unseen. You may have noticed that younger generations seem lighter, more expressive, more open, while you feel like you had to earn every breath of peace. Dolores explained this contrast clearly. Your generation helped anchor stability so that later generations could arrive into a world already beginning to soften. This heaviness you feel isn't weakness. It's evidence of load-bearing souls. And here is the part Dolores Cannon emphasized most strongly. Many people born before 1975 are tired, now not because they are failing, but because their primary contract is nearing completion. The weight you've carried for decades was never meant to be permanent. But to understand why it feels heavier now, we need to look at what happens when a soul finishes its original assignment while still remaining in the body. The answer lies in something Dolores called soul fatigue. And it explains more about your life than you've ever been told. For souls born before 1975, Dolores Cannon describes something that most people feel but rarely understand. The moment when the soul begins to feel done long before the body is finished. This is where the heaviness deepens. Not because life is getting harder, but because your original mission has already been fulfilled. In countless QHT sessions, Dolores heard the same phrase spoken in different words. I'm tired of Earth. Not depressed. Not hopeless. Just deeply, quietly tired. These souls weren't suicidal. They weren't giving up. They simply felt like they had already completed what they came to do. Dolores explained that many volunteers who incarnated before 1975 agreed to take on long, dense lifetimes. Lives focused on endurance, structure, and stabilization. They came to hold families together, to keep societies functioning, to endure systems that were not designed for sensitivity or spiritual awareness. And they did it without recognition. This creates what Dolores called soul fatigue. Not physical exhaustion, but a deep energetic weariness that sleep doesn't fix. You can rest for days and still feel heavy. You can accomplish goals and still feel empty. Because the tiredness isn't in your body. It's in the mission layer of your soul. This is why many people from this generation feel a strange detachment from ambition later in life. Things that once mattered, success, status, competition, approval, begin to lose their pull. Dolores said this happens when a soul completes its karmic obligations earlier than expected. The soul begins to withdraw energy from earth-based pursuits because its role is shifting. And here's the part that confuses people the most. This withdrawal often looks like sadness from the outside, but internally, it feels more like neutrality, a quiet disengagement. You're not angry at the world. You're just no longer impressed by it. Dolores Cannon revealed that these souls often ask during sessions, "Why am I still here?" And the answer from the higher self was never punishment. It was timing. You stay because your presence still stabilizes the field. Even when you're doing nothing, your frequency matters. The years you lived through, before the internet, before constant stimulation, before spiritual language became mainstream, shaped you differently. You learned patience. You learned to endure silence. You learned to hold emotional weight without collapsing. These traits are rare now. This is why people often come to you for support, advice, or grounding. Even when you don't try to be a leader, your nervous system became an anchor through decades of density. And anchors don't feel light. Dolores emphasized that many of these souls are now entering a transition phase. The heaviness intensifies because the world is changing faster than the role you were trained for. You're no longer here to fight or endure. You're here to witness the shift. But the body doesn't immediately understand this change. It still operates as if it must carry everything. That's why the tiredness feels confusing and endless. The key, Dolores said, is not to push harder, but to release the identity of the one who always carries the weight. Dolores Cannon explained that the souls born before 1975 were not meant to enjoy Earth in the way later generations would. They were designed to withstand it. This is a crucial distinction most people never hear. And once you understand it, the heaviness finally makes sense. In her sessions, these souls often showed up as old energies in young bodies. Even as children, they felt different. More serious, more observant, less interested in games and more aware of responsibility. Many reported feeling like they were already old before life had even begun. Dolores said this wasn't imagination, it was memory. These souls had lived many lifetimes already. Earth was not new to them. They volunteered knowing exactly how dense it would feel, because they had been here before during difficult cycles. They were chosen not for excitement, but for reliability. That's why life has always felt heavier for you. You weren't meant to float through it. You were meant to hold it together. Dolores revealed that this generation carried ancestral trauma, collective karma, and unresolved emotional patterns from entire family lines. You didn't just live your own life. You processed history through your nervous system. Wars, scarcity, emotional repression, broken structures. You absorbed these energies simply by being alive during that era. This is why many people born before 1975 feel like they've lived several lives in one. Childhood felt serious. Adulthood felt relentless. And later years feel confusingly empty, as if something is missing, even though nothing is wrong. That missing feeling is not loss. It's completion. Dolores Cannon explained that when a soul finishes its primary contract, it begins to disengage from emotional attachment. This doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop clinging. The world feels less solid. Relationships feel quieter. Drama feels exhausting instead of stimulating. And here's something Dolores emphasized very clearly. This stage is often misdiagnosed as depression. But depression pushes inward with pain. This feeling pulls outward with detachment. You don't feel broken. You feel finished. That's why advice like, find a new purpose, doesn't work. You already had one. You lived it. This is also why your body feels heavier now. When the soul shifts into observer mode, the body feels gravity more intensely. Energy withdraws from survival patterns and begins preparing for integration. The heaviness isn't decay. It's recalibration. Dolores said these souls are no longer here to carry the world. They are here to stabilize the transition by simply being present. Their calm nervous systems, forged in harder times, act like ballast during planetary change. You're not slowing down because you're failing. You're slowing down because the role is changing. And the sooner you stop fighting the heaviness, the sooner it begins to lift. Dolores Cannon went even deeper and revealed something that can feel unsettling at first, but deeply relieving once understood. She said that souls born before 1975 often feel heavier because they are out of sync with the speed of the new world. Not behind it, not inferior to it, simply operating on a different internal rhythm. You grew up in a time where effort was required for everything. Nothing was instant. Stability came from endurance, not shortcuts. Your nervous system was trained to stay alert, to anticipate problems, to carry responsibility without complaint. That wiring doesn't just disappear when the world suddenly accelerates. So when technology exploded, when values shifted overnight, when reality became louder, faster, and more fragmented, your system didn't adapt easily. Not because you couldn't, but because you weren't meant to. Dolores explained that these souls act like anchors. Anchors are not fast. They are heavy by design. They hold position while everything else moves around them. This is why modern culture can feel strangely hollow to you. The endless scrolling, the noise, the surface-level connections. You may participate, but you don't belong in it. And deep down, you know that. Many people born before 1975 report feeling like waiting for something, but they don't to know what. Dolores clarified that this waiting isn't passive. It's a state of readiness. Like a lighthouse that doesn't chase ships, but stands still so others can find their way. Another reason life feels heavier is because you were trained to suppress emotion. Strength was survival. Sensitivity was vulnerability. So you learned to carry feelings silently. Grief, disappointment, responsibility. Without release. Over decades, that unexpressed weight accumulates. Dolores said this generation holds emotion in the body more than in the mind. That's why the heaviness often shows up physically. Tired legs, tight chest, deep fatigue that rest doesn't fix. It's not illness. It's stored experience asking to be acknowledged. And here is the part most people never hear. The heaviness begins to increase right before it is ready to dissolve. When a soul approaches the end of a major service cycle, the old coping mechanisms stop working. Pushing through no longer helps. Distraction fails. The body insists on stillness. This is not decline. It's initiation into a quieter phase of wisdom. Dolores Cannon said these souls are not meant to do more. They are meant to be felt by the world. Their presence alone carries stability. Their calm carries memory. Their lived experience holds the blueprint of endurance that younger souls unconsciously rely on. You were never meant to feel light in a heavy world. You were meant to be the one who could carry it, until the carrying was no longer needed. Dolores Cannon revealed that when souls born before 1975 reach this stage, something subtle but profound begins to happen. The world does not get lighter, you do. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, from the inside out. This is the phase where the soul starts releasing roles it carried for decades. Caretaker, provider, stabilizer, the one who held everything together when no one else could. For most of your life, your identity was built around responsibility. People leaned on you. Systems depended on you. Even when no one said it out loud, you felt the weight of being needed, and you answered it automatically. That was your training. But Dolores explained that no soul is meant to hold that role forever. When the mission nears completion, the soul begins to withdraw energy from external structures. You may notice you no longer feel motivated by the things that once drove you. Goals that mattered for years suddenly feel empty. Obligations that once felt necessary now feel draining. This is not apathy. It is disengagement from outdated contracts. Many people misinterpret this as depression or burnout. But Dolores was very clear. This phase is not a collapse. It's a return. The soul is calling its energy back home after decades of outward service. This is why solitude starts to feel sacred instead of lonely. Why silence feels nourishing. Why being alone doesn't scare you the way it once might have. You're not isolating. You're recalibrating. Another sign she mentioned is emotional neutrality. You may notice you react less intensely to drama, conflict, or chaos. Things that once angered you now pass through without hooking you. This doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've stopped attaching. Attachment is heavy. Awareness is light. Dolores said souls born before 1975 are masters of integration. You've lived through enough cycles to understand that nothing stays the same. Not relationships, not systems, not even identities. So when others panic during change, you remain grounded. Not because you don't feel, but because you've already processed what they are just beginning to face. And here is something deeply important. This stage often comes with guilt. You may feel guilty for resting, guilty for saying no, guilty for not rescuing everyone anymore. But Dolores emphasized that guilt is the final thread tying the soul to its old role. Once released, the heaviness lifts dramatically. You were never meant to carry the world forever. You were meant to teach it how to stand on its own. This phase is not about disappearance. It's about presence without burden. And once the soul learns that lesson, the weight you've carried for so long begins to soften. Not because life becomes easier, but because you finally stop carrying what was never yours to hold alone. Dolores Cannon explained that when souls born before 1975 enter this phase, the body often reacts before the mind fully understands what is happening. This is why the heaviness is not only emotional, it is physical. You may feel tired in ways sleep doesn't fix. Your joints may ache without clear reason. Your chest may feel tight at night, as if something old is finally loosening. Doctors find nothing wrong, yet you know something is shifting. According to Dolores, this is because the body is recalibrating after decades of holding compressed energy. For most of your life, your nervous system was trained for endurance. You learned how to stay functional under pressure, how to keep moving even when exhausted, how to override your own needs to meet the demands of the world. That survival mode became normal. But survival mode is heavy. As the soul begins to step out of its contract, the body no longer agrees to carry that level of tension. Muscles soften. Old stress patterns dissolve. And when they do, the sensation can feel unsettling, like weakness, even though it is actually release. Dolores said many people mislabel this stage as getting old, but this has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with completion. This is also why many people from this generation feel drawn to simplicity. You may suddenly crave quieter spaces, fewer conversations, cleaner environments. Loud energy becomes exhausting. Crowds feel overwhelming, not because you can't handle them, but because your system no longer needs them. Your soul is moving from participation to observation, and observation requires less weight. Another sign Dolores spoke about is a deep sensitivity to dishonesty. You may find it harder than ever to tolerate fake smiles, forced conversations, or emotional manipulation. You don't have the patience for games anymore. Your system rejects what is not real. Truth feels light. Pretense feels heavy. This is why relationships may fall away during this period. Not through conflict, but through quiet distance. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing understanding. You let people be where they are, even if that means walking alone for a while. Dolores reassured that this loneliness is temporary. It is a clearing phase. The soul is making room for resonance instead of obligation. And here is something most people are never told. When this heaviness begins to lift, you may briefly feel lost. Without the weight, you may wonder who you are now, what your purpose is without constant responsibility. This is not emptiness. It is space. Space where your soul can finally breathe without armor. Space where wisdom replaces effort. Space where being matters more than doing. The heaviness you feel is not punishment. It is pressure being released, layer by layer, after a lifetime of holding the line. Dolores Cannon revealed that after the body begins to release and the mind starts to quiet, the soul enters a deeply misunderstood stage, the witness phase. This is where many people born before 1975 feel most disconnected from the world, yet strangely more aligned within themselves. You may notice that your perspective has shifted. You no longer see life as something to conquer or fix. Instead, you observe it unfolding. News, global events, even personal crises no longer pull you into fear the way they once did. You understand patterns now. You've seen cycles repeat enough times to recognize how stories end. This is not numbness. This is clarity. Dolores explained that souls from this generation were never meant to remain in reaction mode forever. Their role was to anchor stability during turbulent eras, wars, economic shifts, cultural upheavals, and massive psychological change. Once that anchoring is complete, the soul naturally steps back. This is why you may feel invisible at times. The world is still running at high speed, chasing urgency and noise while you are operating on a quieter frequency. People may even accuse you of not caring anymore. But caring does not require chaos. Another sign of this stage is a loss of interest in proving anything. You don't feel the need to defend your beliefs, your past, or your decisions. Validation no longer motivates you. Approval feels irrelevant. You know who you are, and that is enough. Dolores said this is the mark of an old soul completing a long service cycle. There is also a subtle emotional shift that happens here. Gratitude replaces ambition. Acceptance replaces struggle. You begin to see beauty in ordinary moments. A quiet morning, a familiar place, a shared silence. These moments carry more meaning than any achievement ever did. This is because your soul is transitioning from builder to keeper of wisdom, and wisdom does not shout. It radiates. At this stage, many people feel drawn to teaching, guiding, or simply listening, not in formal ways, but through presence. Others may open up to you unexpectedly. Strangers may tell you their life stories. Children may feel safe around you. Animals may linger near you. Dolores described this as a natural signal of completion. When a soul no longer needs to push, its energy becomes steady, and steady energy feels safe to others. You may still feel the heaviness at times, especially when old habits resurface. But it no longer controls you. You recognize it for what it is, residue from a role you've already fulfilled. This is not the end of your journey. It is the quiet mastery phase, where you stop carrying the world, and the world begins to learn from the way you stand within it. Dolores Cannon said that when souls born before 1975 reach this final phase, something profound but subtle occurs. The weight they carried is finally acknowledged by the soul itself. Not by society, not by history books, but by the higher awareness that sent them here in the first place. You may begin to sense a deep inner peace that arrives without explanation. It does not come from achievement or resolution. It comes from recognition, a knowing that says, you did what you came here to do. This is why the heaviness does not disappear all at once. It softens, it loosens. It fades in waves. Each wave carries away a lifetime of pressure, responsibility, and unspoken sacrifice. Dolores taught that these souls are not here to escape the world. They are here to complete it. Their role is not dramatic. It is stabilizing. They hold frequency simply by existing. This is also why many from this generation feel less afraid of death than others. Death does not feel like an ending to you. It feels like a transition you understand on a cellular level. Not because you want to leave, but because you remember that consciousness does not end. You may feel moments where time slows, or memories surface not with pain, but with compassion. You forgive yourself for things you carried for decades. You see younger versions of yourself and feel tenderness instead of regret. That is the soul integrating its journey. Dolores said this integration phase often brings synchronicities. Familiar songs appearing at the right moment. Meaningful dreams, sudden clarity about old questions. These are not signs of something coming. They are confirmations of something completed. You may still participate in the world, but you are no longer owned by it. You engage selectively. You conserve energy. You choose peace over intensity. And that choice changes everything. If life feels heavier for you than it does for others, it is not because you failed to adapt. It is because you carried more. You stood in the gap when the world was unstable. You held frequency when others were learning how. You stayed when leaving would have been easier. And now, the weight is lifting, not because the world has become lighter, but because you no longer need to hold it. According to Dolores Cannon, this is the quiet honor given to souls who volunteered early, stayed long, and completed their mission with integrity. If this message resonates, it is not random. It is recognition. And recognition is the final release.